is that language acquisition is fundamentally different than most other skills that we learn in our life. Because the way I think about it is that most skills in our life you either learn consciously through input or unconsciously through output. So if you take, most things in life are actually a majority or a combination of these two things. And so it's, I use like easy to understand examples, but if you want to say so if say when you get a new phone, if you are an old person who doesn't know how to experiment with stuff, you learn how to use the phone consciously through input, meaning that you read the instructions, so you're taking the information from the outside into the inside, and through that process, you now know how to do it. You now have acquired the skill because you read the instructions and you know everything you need to know. But if you take like learning to throw darts, that's like actually a process that you learn through unconsciously through output, because what goes in your inside the head of a professional dart thrower is exactly the same as what goes goes through your head of me or you when we're throwing darts. It's just you aim through the target and you throw, and it either goes where you want it to go or it doesn't. And what determines whether it goes where you want it to go or not is just unconscious wiring that you develop over time through practice. But when you're practicing, all you're doing is aiming for the target and throwing and doing that over and over. The improvement, you are not actually the one doing the improvement. And that's why I call it an unconscious process, because it's really just your unconscious mind like slowly learning physics in its own right, so that it can control like your hand movement to like correspond to where the thing's actually going to go. And I think things like learning how to drive are actually a combination of the two, because you learn like the rules of the road consciously, but when it actually comes to how much do you have to turn the steering wheel in order to make the car go where you want to go, how hard do you push the gas pedal, you are learning through output. And so yeah, with the darts, it's through output, because you're actually like, you're doing the skill and you're learning it through doing it. So you're almost like creating the skill out of nowhere.
So you're saying that the dart throwing is similar to what your thought is, that dart throwing is the same as when you're learning language, it's only through output?
No. I'm thinking the opposite of that. I'm saying almost everything in life is either consciously through input or unconsciously through output.
And what is different for language?
Language is so the not just the conscious unconscious, but also whether it's through input or output is important. So it's like I said, in the instruction manual you're reading it, and so you're learning through the input. But darts, you're actually learning through output by actually doing it. You're creating the skill out of nowhere just through a goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with language, I think you learn it unconsciously through input. So speaking, outputting is not actually what gets you better at language in a fundamental way. You get better through language input. Because like in Japanese, right, there's pretty much one natural way, or a very few number of natural ways to say any given thing in any situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to know that ahead of time if you want to be able to sound natural. You can't just make it up using the like.
But how can you know it ahead of time if you're all Japanese all the time and you haven't read somewhere or looked somewhere or got input from somebody that knows the language already? How can you be thrown into Japan? And
so what all Japanese all the time tells you to do is immerse yourself in Japanese media 24/7. Except it's not, at the beginning you don't talk. It's only input. You become a baby.
Can I stop you just for a second?
Yeah.
So although I don't call it all Japanese all the time, I have recommended this more times than you can imagine, where I say you need to listen to podcasts and watch TV shows that are not designed for you to learn, but they're designed for Japanese people to enjoy. I say the same thing for Korean. I say the same thing for Japanese. And I show in my podcast multiple times podcasts that you need to listen to that are not like, hi, today we're doing slow Chinese. It's here's a Chinese radio show, or here's a Korean radio show where housewives call in and talk about their problems in life. And people will constantly tell me, but I don't understand it. I said, that's exactly the idea. Your brain will find patterns that you cannot learn. Language sometimes cannot be taught. Certain things through, for example, our books 1 through 3 are very concrete things that exist in a language. They are like, dog is inu, neko is cat. Those are very equal one-off things that you could spend time to memorize from a book. But once you get into bigger grammar that doesn't exist in English, you really can't learn it. You can't really be taught. You can't be taught it. You really can't be taught when to use wa and ga. That has to be a ton of input from outside sources.
Yes.
And I give examples of, I'm learning Chinese now. After I learned Korean, I'm learning Chinese. And I listen to this podcast called Meioisu Radio. And I give examples of, I learned how to say raho naga, which is like, and then I. But I only learned that not from a textbook. I learned it, I heard it over and over again. And I explained that when you do that, which I assume all Japanese all the time is the same thing, is that these nails stick up in the language that you hear often enough, that you pound down, you figure out what that means based on the context, or you look it up and you figure it out. And then once you know it, it melts into the background and the next nail sticks up. But if you combine that with a guy like me or you saying, hey guys, you might have heard this particular thing. When you learn it, a light bulb goes off much faster if you're learning from another source that actually explains, here's an English equivalent. That's what I'm saying. I never really understood what AJATT was, but if that's what it is, that's literally what I recommend also to people. But I also say, it's also very helpful to have someone explain it to you. A sentence I've said before in my stream is, whereas Rosetta Stone, for example, is just pictures, and you have this, you go through and you click, like they'll say neko, and you'll click inu, and it'll be a buzz, and you'll be wrong. And eventually the sentences get more complicated, and they say, otoko wa teburu no shita ni imasu. And you're like, oh, what does that mean? Does that mean the boy's under the table, or that he's hiding from an abusive father? You really don't know based on the context of that. So in that sense, I like to say, a sentence is worth 1,000 pictures, because I could just tell you how to attach a direction to an object in Japanese, and then teach you directions, and you'll know how to say teburu no shita, teburu no yoko, teburu no ue, and you don't have to spend months trying to figure that out in an immersive situation.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between like conscious ability and then intuitive ability when it comes to language, and I think you have to. It's kind of tricky, but you have to make this distinction. Like in like you're saying, if you take wa and ga, then that's something that maybe to truly get, you have to learn it. You have to allow your mind to acquire it unconsciously, right? And then you have an intuitive knowledge of what it means. You just kind of know, but maybe you can't explain it without further introspection or something.
But see, I can explain a lot of wa and ga because I've taught it for so long. I can explain it to a beginner,
but I can say, for example,
I can say, for example, the way that I teach Wanga is I say, look, there are books written on Wanga, and this is an absolute truth. There are books written on the theory of Wanga, so even Japanese people can't properly explain Wanga. But there are hard set rules that you can learn about Wanga to help you separate it from the harder things. For example, you can never have wa after a question word. You can't say dore wa, dare wa, doko wa. It's always ga. And I can give you typical rules, like in the middle of a conversation, ga is going to be used because wa was already introduced in the topic. And I can give examples of that. And what that does is it creates a beacon in someone's mind that isn't living in Japan, doesn't have the luxury of living in Japan, okay? And they could start learning the basics and create a foundation. I do believe 100% that you eventually have to wean off of textbooks because there's only so much a textbook can do. The textbooks that I'm learning from in Korean are complete crap. Like they're complete shit. And most textbooks are complete shit. And I would agree that probably my textbook, in your opinion, is complete shit. Okay? But when I'm in Korea and I'm doing the immersion lesson, when I'm only learning in Korean, I think it's fantastic. But I wish there was a textbook that could explain things sometimes so that I wasn't sitting there struggling and feeling depression after a lesson and going to a coffee shop and crying because I didn't understand a concept in Korean. You guys don't know Korean, so I won't bring it up. But a simple concept that someone could have just said to me, no, that's the same thing. It's not two different things. A textbook is a guide. No student will get good with just my textbooks or any textbook. No student will. They have to be motivated to go to other sources, which I say, by the way, all the time. And I think that was my biggest issue with your video was you're taking out of, it's not out of context. I did say I haven't read, hang on, I'm getting a phone call. Hang on. もしもし。
もしもし。
どうした？
テキスト送ったけど見てないよね。
見てない。今電話中だけど、他の人と。
ごめん。じゃあ、見て、とりあえず
緊急？
いや、全然。でも、早く返事くれると嬉しいけど。
わかった。じゃあ、1時間ぐらいしたらいい？ 1時間は困る？
いいよ。
わかった。
はい。
じゃあね。Sorry about that. I don't know. I recently learned Korean, and I did a combination of the methods of going to Korea and using Korean. And when I went to Korea after learning the traditional methods, I made a video called Language Depression and I talk about, you think you're good because you learned in the textbook, and then you get there and you realize you don't know how they really speak because you learned textbook Korean. So I'm aware that textbooks are a problem, but when I learn new grammar, that night when I'm in Korea, I'll go to a language meetup and I'll purposely in my mind have 3 or 4 grammar that I want to work into a conversation just to feel how it works. And I never preface it with something like, hey, can you listen to this sentence I'm going to say? I just use it raw in a conversation. And if there's a negative reaction to that, I get a minus for that particular grammar in my head, and I know I didn't use it right. If there's a positive to that, I get a plus in there. And then over time, what I call balls of fluency start building up, where I've got the feedback loop happening properly in the language.
Yeah, see, AJAT takes like a really different approach, and it has a totally different kind of approach or like model of how language acquisition works. And the other thing is, like, it's not really a method as much as it is a philosophy. Like, it's telling you, like, just go and spend literally as much time as you can in Japanese and pick it up. Like, that's kind of, if you were going to say it in one sentence, that kind of would be what it is. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's saying don't use one source either. It says use all different types of Japanese. It's kind of more like a meta orientation towards how you should do, like, where you should look for your learning. But the thing is that, like, if you kind of take language ability and kind of try to have a more nuanced view, like, we have somewhere in our unconscious a model of how language works, right? Like, if I said in English, how come we say big red dog but not red big dog? You probably wouldn't be able to explain the, like, complicated grammatical
Because
rule,
we start with the bigger thing first and we scale down to the smaller.
Okay, well, maybe you happen to already know that, or maybe you just really
I know that through learning Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, and I noticed the patterns that, for example, Japanese say 2010年3月17日. They start with big and they go down to the smaller. So English has a certain pattern too. We say, my friend, I think actually we might be the reverse. My friend who lives, let me think about this for a second. I have to think about what direction I was going with that. There's a scaling up or a scaling down method, and each language has a different way of doing it. And I can explain to a Japanese person, obviously I would have to prepare and make sure that what I'm saying is correct, because right now I'm trying to think. Big red dog, how do you qualify big versus red? I don't even know, honestly. So maybe.
Well, I mean, that's totally besides the point, because just the point I want to make is that, like, we have an intuitive understanding of how language works, and most native English speakers, they know that big red dog is natural and red big dog isn't, but they don't know why. And even after reflecting on it for a few minutes, wouldn't be able to notice. You can notice because you have special training, but that's besides the point. The point is that we have an unconscious understanding of knowledge, and that's why we're able to speak even when we're so inebriated that we couldn't, like, consciously couldn't think about anything logically, you know? It's like a very intuitive thing. And we acquire new words, even in our native language, all the time without even realizing it, right? Like, apparently people from the age of 20 to 40 learn on average 1 word a day with completely unconsciously, just because that part of the language acquisition center in the brain doesn't really shut off. But if you just, that process of the brain acquiring language is something that happens unconsciously and something that happens through input. But if you just consciously memorize, like, okay, this word means this, or this grammatical structure means that your unconscious model of the language hasn't been changed due to that. It's completely separate from that. It's just,
well, I want to point out that I have railed against people rote memorizing flashcards. I call Duolingo a glorified flashcard system. I call the same thing to memorize. And I say that knowing that I'm biased because it's not the same as the way I teach Japanese. But I tell people, learn the words that are in your life. I don't say go out and just learn random words. I don't know how you learn the stuff that you're reading in the visual novel for sure, because I look at them and I think, why would I ever use that word unless I needed those words to read a visual novel?
Well, because the thing is, the orientation is different. I'm not thinking about, like, I'm going to learn this so that I can say it, or I'm going to learn it so I can produce it. When I started learning Japanese, the only thing I worried about was I want to understand Japanese. I didn't think about producing at all. So I didn't worry about, like, the difference between wa and ga, because most of the time for most cases, it's not important to just understand what's going on.
It's true. And you can drop it if you want to.
Yeah, and I didn't care about like I didn't worry about how do you conjugate for te form, how do you conjugate for the rareru, sase, rareru, all that stuff. I didn't worry about that at all. It was just trying to understand it, and eventually, and I'd listen to Japanese like as much as I can. Most of the time, I was not in Japan. I always used my headphones, and I listened to Japanese all the time. And then I'd take time where I would read books and I'd look up words, and then I'd make flashcards to memorize the words that came up in what I was doing. And I got to a point pretty within like a year and a half where I could understand almost all Japanese. Like I could watch anime pretty much and understand close to 100% without subtitles. And around that time, this whole time, I was never speaking, right? I wasn't trying to speak. I wasn't worrying about making sure I could speak. But it just kind of started to come naturally because I'd seen the same thing said in the same context over and over and over and over. And it was just like, I just had that intuitive understanding.
Repetition is the mother of knowledge.
Yeah, but it didn't happen through output. It happened only through input.
Sure, but it's still repetition, Matt.
Yeah. But what
It's
I'm saying
listening, if you listen to the same song over and over again, you're going to learn the lyrics of that song, most likely.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, you watch enough Japanese TV and you learn, この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします. You learn that without even thinking about it. If you make enough bad phone calls in Japan, お客様がおかけになった電話番号は現在使用されておりません. You learn that unconsciously. And it happens to me where when I'm teaching Japanese, I sometimes don't know how to explain a concept because I don't even know where I learned it.
Exactly.
And so, but that comes from just doing what you are telling people to do and what I tell them to do. Put your life into Japanese mode, live Japanese mode. I tell people to put their phones, their Siri in Japanese, put their computer in Japanese mode, put everything in Japanese mode. And because the struggle, you'll learn things that you have to learn because you need to learn it.
Yeah,
I think we're agreeing on many parts, but I think that there's a place for. And obviously, look, I'm biased. I'm going to fight for a method that says, hey, if you're going to say des is a copula, well, that's dumb. Like, I agree. That's a stupid way to learn. But if I could tell you that des means is, am, are, and all of the be verbs in English, and then I can give you some examples, and I can say, if I point to myself and say, Georgie des, it means I am George. If I point to you and say Georgie des, it means you are George. If I point to a girl and say Georgie des, it means she is. And I can explain to you that Japanese verbs have built in all of the pronouns based on the context. Well, that will help you out and not make you freak out and think you always have to say kanojo and karewa. And I agree. My method is actually getting you to speak more than comprehend. That's a really good point that I'm getting from what you're saying. Your method is learn to understand it before you can speak it. Whereas I'm like, get out there and speak it.
Yeah, but like you're saying, like you said, that way they know that you don't have to just use kare or something. It's like if you actually can understand Japanese and have listened to a large amount of Japanese, that's going to be obvious to you, right? Like you're going to know.
Maybe.
No, because that's how it became obvious to Japanese people. You're learning it the same way. I do think it is important to learn grammar. I don't think people should skip that. Just for me, grammar is a tool that helps make native input comprehensible. It's not a tool to create language yourself.
Can I give you an example of where learning really helped me out? So,
sure.
So you have the verb yosoku suru and kitai suru. Okay, and kitai suru and yosoku both in English translate to expectation. I expect. What's the difference between kitai suru and yosoku suru? When would you use one over the other?
Yosoku suru is like when you're just predicting what's going to happen in the future.
Okay.
Kitai suru has the nuance of what you want to happen. It's what you hope happens.
Right, you're expecting a good expectation, right? It's got the nuance of good expectation. Now, I had been using that wrong forever, and I would always just default to kitai dekinakatta. I didn't expect that to happen, but that really means I didn't expect something good to happen. So I would use it wrong. I didn't learn that until I was in a classroom in Korea learning Korean, because Korean shares similar kanji words, and they have kirehada and yechukada, which are the exact same equivalents. I didn't learn. My Japanese got corrected by being in a classroom, learning from a textbook, and making that mistake. And I don't know if over the years I've been speaking Japanese for 30 years. My wife is Japanese, but I've never got that nuance.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I think it's really dangerous to output early on, is because before you have a very a strong foundation in the language and you try to speak, there's going to be holes everywhere. Of course, like one hole is you don't know the difference between yosoku and kitai, and so you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And that's just, of course, who's going to deny that you make a lot of mistakes when you're trying to speak a language that you don't know that well yet. But the thing is, if you're speaking a lot, you're going to build habits, and those habits, once they're set in stone, they're like, your mind doesn't really reconsider them. You have really strong confirmation bias to that because you know that it works in your own experience. Because even if you make small mistakes or say things a native wouldn't say, a lot of times they'll still understand you. And then, so just like you said, you can go years and years without realizing that you made the mistake. Whereas if you don't speak at all and you just allow your mind to continue to absorb and continue to look for the nuance, and then you only speak rarely, really kind of humbly saying, okay, what do I know I've heard before in a similar situation like this? And you slowly, like after, like that's why AJAT is so intense, is because it's saying like, spend the first 18 months of learning Japanese, like dedicating your entire life to it 24/7, listening to it all the time, but then don't even really try to speak it at all, because that's actually going to fuck you up. And if you like do through
is that indicative of all methods for AJATT, or is that just your version of AJATT?
It's mine's more extreme, because the original creator Katsumoto said, yeah, it's okay to output. He said, like, don't really seek it out, but it's like, yeah, it's good to like practice outputting and stuff. Just make sure you get corrected a lot, but really don't worry about it. But I think he was just kind of being more modest like that because it sounds too intense when you say it like what I say. But I'm living proof that it works really well. And I know, and I have a bunch of other friends where it's the same, because that's what babies do, right? They go through this long silent period of just letting their brain figure it out.
I don't disagree with that, and I think there's a tremendous amount of validity in what you're saying. But I know many people that also went to college, took classes, and then got good at it. And I went through high school classes. I lived in Japan. I had girlfriends, and I was outputting all the time. And my Japanese, not your level, maybe you're more amazing because you focused in different areas. But I'm sure no one would say George Trombley doesn't speak Japanese.
Well, yeah, of course, but how long did it take you to get to that level that you're proud at now?
Well, let me tell you what. I went to Japan when I was 12, and at 17, I had my first job interpreting. So I was pretty good even at 17.
Yeah, and so how many years is that? Like 5?
Yeah, but I was 12. I couldn't get a job before that.
Well, yeah. Well, okay,
I had girlfriends that were Japanese. I don't know. I learned I was speaking fluent Korean in about 3 years. I wasn't all Korean all the time. I was learning in textbooks and then using those particular things. By the way, I'm not against your method. I'm not even saying it's bad. I think it's actually probably really good. I'm gonna try it. Why not?
Yeah, well,
Japanese, obviously. I already know enough Japanese.
Well, like you said with your Japanese, you said that just until recently you were mixing up yosoku and kitai suru, and there are probably a bunch of little. There might be a bunch of other little things like that.
Oh, there's tons of things like that.
Whereas I feel pretty confident in my like I still sometimes when I speak, it's not like I'm perfect all the time, but I feel like I have a pretty strong ability of to tell when I say something that's kind of weird. I know that I just said something kind of weird, but I just had to because I.
Well, can I add something to this though?
Yeah.
You know, you're 22. Right?
Yeah.
And
all right, just turned 23.
You just turned 23, right? And what are you doing right now in your life?
I'm taking a break from school and doing this.
Right. So you're in school and you're focusing solely on this. So I'm a 45-year-old man. I lived in Japan until I was almost 21, and then I came back. So my effective learning of Japanese stops when I come back to the United States at age 21. I become a tour guide. And my actual Japanese increases during the time of tour guiding because I'm speaking Japanese every day, okay? But most people that are young are in the position where they can dedicate all of that time. There's no time in the day look, I buy books all the time that I don't read, all the fucking time, but I just don't have the time to read them. My intent's there, but I'm running a business. I have 2 daughters. You know, I'm not... What do you say to that? I mean, how can you say that this method is viable to throw all your energy into only doing Japanese when you're living a normal life?
Well, like I said, I don't think AJAT's for everyone. I think it's for a very select few with a very specific goal in mind. You know, like you have to have a certain type of personality to make AJAT work, and that's just a fact. And also but yet your premise in your video, which I tore apart on my stream, by the way,
is that the who was that guy, Stephen Peresh or something? I forget his name.
Krashen?
Yeah, he says language learning is the same for everybody, and I say bullshit. It's different for everybody. I say there are visual learners and there are non-visual learners, and there are people that for example, I sing a lot of Korean karaoke, and my one friend doesn't speak as Korean well as me, can sing better than me because she's very visual, and she can just learn the sounds and repeat them. Whereas when I read the Korean on the screen for karaoke, I must understand the meaning before I can remember it. It's a weird quirk of me, or maybe maybe some people have this, and that's why reading Japanese books is a pain for me, because I don't skim over every word. Every word I want to recognize and understand. So early on, the pain was there. Where I was like, fuck it, I'll read a manga, which always has furigana, and that's what I ended up reading the most. I was 16 or 17 at the time when I was really hardcore learning Japanese. So for my style of learning, I wasn't willing to look up every single word. And for my friend's style of wording, she has to see it before she can learn it, whereas I can just hear it and memorize it. So I think it's different for everybody.
What Stephen Krashen is saying isn't that everyone learns the same. He's saying everyone acquires language the same, and he makes a difference between learning language and acquiring language. And he says that acquiring, like when a language that you have acquired, you know unconsciously. You can use it like with zero thought. It's just completely automatic. It's like if someone, like right now you're listening to me speak English and you couldn't not understand it even if you wanted to, right? Because you have acquired English. It's like, yeah, so...
Okay, yes, but I understand this, and I say this all the time. Like, once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. I do this very early on in my teaching stream. I say, look, the thing about Japanese is once you know the word, you can't ignore it. That's why billboards work. That's why advertising works, because you can't ignore it. And I show them words. I take a blank piece of paper, I write a word on it, and I say, I'm going to show you this word, and I want you to not comprehend it. Don't understand it. And I even explain to them, even that phrasing we don't say. No one ever says, don't understand this, because it doesn't make sense to say that. Because if I flip it to you, you can't not understand it. If you know something, you can't understand it. And that's what the weird thing is, we totally agree that all Japanese all the time is a good method. What I hadn't understand about all Japanese all the time is that you're not trying to put output. Whereas I'm pushing output from the very beginning. I'm saying, don't worry about your accent. You can work on that later. But what you need to do is build muscle memory for speaking. And you need to shadow. You need to copy what people are saying. And you need to get on HelloTalk and meet Japanese people. And it doesn't matter that you make mistakes, make them, because every mistake you make brings you closer to not making mistakes.
Yeah. Okay. Well. So I think that's totally valid. Just I think that that's more suited to people who don't have the final goal of reaching a like indistinguishably native level. Because when you're making a lot of mistakes, because basically it just comes down to this: it's easier to build good habits the first time than correct bad habits.
Look, I don't disagree with that, but I think to say that people doing the other methods don't have the goal of becoming fluent, I think that's completely misread. If you watch older videos where I did self-introduction analysis from people, there's some fantastic people that were learning with that style, and they got really good. And their goal, I don't think I've ever met anyone learning Japanese where they're like, yeah, I just want to learn how to say a few phrases. I don't ever typically deal with those people. I deal with people that all say, I can't wait to watch anime without subtitles. I can't wait to speak to my wife's parents fully in Japanese. But you all have to start at a bottom level and build up. Everyone is suck at one point, and there's multiple methods to get past suck. But I'll agree with you. There's no way to get past suck without immersing yourself in a lot of the language, because it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah. Well, this is what I think. Is that if your final goal is to get to a like indistinguishably native level, the quickest path is AJET. If your goal is to get out of suck so that you can do something in the language, what you're talking about is faster. It's faster path because you do output earlier on and you build the skills that allow you to do that. And although it's going to have mistakes in it, it's going to work, right? Because it's going to be corrective. Like if something doesn't work, you're going to find out because they're not going to understand you.
So let me ask you a question. So let's say I decide tomorrow I'm going to learn Vietnamese, and
let me say just one last thing. I think that although if your final goal is to get to that indistinguishably native level, doing what you're saying as a start to get out of suckage is going to be a long cut in the end, because you're going to have to undo all those habits.
Okay, so well, please tell me then, when I learn, and I'm asking this in actual reality because I'm willing to experiment. So let's say I want to do AVAT, all Vietnamese all the time. What's my step one? Let's assume I find some Vietnamese media and I start listening to it.
Okay,
right?
yeah. So like first of all, yeah. So when you first start listening to a new language, your brain doesn't like isn't used to it at all. It doesn't know what phonemes are contained in it, and so just listening to it, like even if you have no idea what's going on, is going to be beneficial to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first, agent just says, okay, well, use every second in your day, like get headphones, get a little MP3 player, put a bunch of Vietnamese on. It doesn't even matter what it is because you're just trying to allow your brain to learn how to parse the phonemes, and then listen to it when you're like everywhere you go, from the moment you wake up to get a shower speaker, do it on the bathroom, do it like listen while you're cooking, as much as you can realistically, because it's like,
Okay.
why not?
All right.
And then you're gonna want to start. So in addition to that, I mean, some language like Japanese has a specific challenge of kanji. I think Vietnamese has a pretty straightforward alphabet. I'm pretty sure it's just like phonetic.
They do, but they have tones. They have 7 different tones.
Okay, so now you're probably going to want to get a normal old textbook that just teaches you the fundamentals and what the tones are and the basic phonology and everything. And that process is the same. Just it's the orientation that's kind of different, because the orientation is not, okay, let me read this textbook so that I can produce the conversations that are it's being used as an example. It's just, okay, let me read this textbook so that maybe I can understand a little more Vietnamese. And you build that foundation, and so like the very, very beginning is pretty much the same, because yeah, you're gonna have to just memorize like the most common 200 vocab words and everything. You would probably do this with an SRS because that's the most efficient way to memorize anything. I'm guessing like about Anki and how that stuff works.
Yeah, but I rail against Anki more than I've said good things about Anki.
Well,
because
so
I'm not a fan of rote memorizing words unless they're words that are
So Ajat would say you're only probably gonna rote memorize like the most common 100 words, because you gotta like start somewhere, and you don't even have to actually, because Ajat says the way that you use an SRS. So, but let me just keep going chronologically. So yeah, so you build you get the basic like grammatical foundation and whatever, just because it's like that's how you start, and then you just want to go and start trying to understand media. Like go find a podcast, or it's easiest to learn through written materials. So you probably want to like go find a website or go find a comic book in Vietnamese and just like try it, like read through and try to find something that you can understand based off what you learned in your textbook. And that will probably be a lot of things, because if it's something like a comic book, there's things that you could probably understand even with zero actual knowledge of the language. And so then you want to find something that's I+1, which just means that it's like, it looks like you could probably understand it if you just looked up maybe one thing, or maybe you can understand it, but only due to the specific context. And then you take that whole sentence and you make a card for that in Anki, where you just put that sentence on the front, and then you look up whatever you didn't know and put that on the back. And so and if it makes sense to you, then you just learned that one word, right? And you know exactly what context it came from, and it's going to be easier to remember when you're reviewing, because you have the sentence here that means something to you.
Yes,
so
this is what I call in my quote unquote method beacon sentences, where you give someone a sentence that can be turned into multiple styles of sentences.
Yeah, except this one, it's like you don't know anything else about this. Like you don't have any information about how it's compatible to other things, because it's like you just got a real comic book, and you're like trying to decode from a pretty early on, because you're probably only gonna have a relatively weak foundation in just the grammar, and so you're just you're kind of just go out into the wild, and you just see what you can understand and try to glean what you can, and you slowly build up more and more like snowball.
And the key point is I wouldn't speak any Vietnamese. I would only
not at the beginning, or basically the principle is you only say what you know is correct because you've heard natives say it multiple times. Like you can't trust your textbook. They're like, your textbook's saying,
funny, because this is exactly what I tell people: say what you can say, not what you want to say.
Yeah, just the difference is, just because a textbook tells you can say this doesn't really, like, in my mind, that's still fake, because you don't know if your textbook's lying or not. You can only trust real Japanese or real Vietnamese. You can say, okay, do I know for sure that it's okay to say this because I've heard a Vietnamese person say it? Yes or no? Like, just because your textbook says that Vietnamese people say it, that's different in my opinion. And so you're just probably like more, if you want to be.
Well, I mean, my textbooks are pretty well known for giving actual sentences and not bullshit sentences. Like my Korean textbook has a sentence that's something like, while Celadon vases were prevalent in the Joseon era, something vases were prevalent in this other era. And I'm like, what the fuck is that sentence? I would never make a sentence like that in my book to teach the grammar. On the other hand, I would give a more normal sentence. TOEFL testing is the same thing. If you pick up any TOEFL book or TOEIC book, the sentences in there are completely unrealistic.
Yeah, but even so, it's like if you're talking about what you need in order to be able to output correctly, like that in Japanese and in every language, right? Words have very, very, very specific nuance, and there's no way you can grasp that exact nuance unless like the only way to do it is to actually see that word used in a bunch of different contexts by natives, right?
Of course.
And so basically they're saying that, okay, and you want to be, the goal with AJAT is when you start outputting, you're at like 99% accuracy rate, which means that you can only say words that you've actually heard in context over and over so that you already like intuitively know the nuance. That's why reading it, even if the one sentence in the textbook is natural, you can't actually tell what it means from that. You can only get that exact razor sharp, nuance level understanding through having come in contact with it countless times in real life.
I think what's interesting though is so far you're saying in the beginning use textbooks, but it seemed like you were kind of saying textbooks is not the way to learn. But in the beginning, you do use textbooks.
It's different. I'm saying it's the fundamental difference is textbooks is not a guidebook on how to produce the language. It's a guidebook to understand the language. So it's a great tool because it's like you can read a basic explanation of like wa and ga, right? And then maybe you'll be able to parse the sentence like kimi wa dare desu ka or whatever. It's like you could understand that. And although you still don't know the exact nuance of that because you don't know the exact nuance of kimi and you don't know the exact nuance of what des means and all that stuff, it's like, okay, you get like a basic grasp of it. And so and that's a lot better than nothing, right? And so now that it's like you kind of know that this kind of idea exists, I think that's what you're talking about. Now that it's pointed out to you, it's a thing. Then every time you come across it, it's not just a random blob anymore. It's that, and so now it's easier for you to store more the nuanced information that you slowly build up over time, because you kind of have a dictionary entry for that idea in your head.
I see.
And so it's the difference is that most people think that textbooks are a guide on how to speak. It's like, okay, it's like I can think in my native language, I can use this algorithm, and I can produce Japanese, and that will work.
I don't know, but they've been pretty they've been good for me in Korean, and then I use those things. And then when I hear the natives reinforce it, that becomes stronger. And then when I hear a different way of them, if they ever say a different way, or they tell me that's weird, I just kind of throw it away and forget it.
Yeah, it works.
I don't have a problem doing that.
That works, but think about how.
See, my goal is to reproduce right away. I went to Taiwan last week after 2 semesters of Chinese. I was there last week, and I met a friend that didn't speak any English, and we were able to have conversation, and I was very happy with my level. And I had never, my teacher wasn't even good. She never actually had us do conversation in class. So all of my experience was through Hello Talk and using what I had learned in class. So obviously I was probably pretty shitty, but at least I was able to communicate. And that for me was happy. I don't care to reproduce exactly like a native in the beginning. I know that will come later on. For me, I'm not worried about that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's all a matter about like what your goals are, because if like you're saying, like right now when you're speaking Korean, like basically that the reality is that no matter how much you beg native speakers, they're not going to correct every little thing because there's just too much, because language is so exact, right? Like when we think in English, how quickly you can tell that someone, even an amazingly high level speaker, how quickly you can tell that they're not that it's not their native language just because of a little collocation or just a little thing on pronunciation. And so it's like of course a native speaker can't sit by and just point out all those things. They really only point out the mistakes that are so big that it's going to cause a serious problem in communication. But there's a huge gap between, okay, you can communicate no problem and you actually sound just like a native speaker. And so taking your approach of outputting a lot and letting the result of that output be your guide is going to help you get to the point where, yeah, you can communicate no problem. I agree. But it's not going to get you to that level.
I think that's a really good insight. I think that's a really good insight. I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and so the thing is that you're gonna.
I think maybe you could say in the beginning of learning Japanese, you spend the first 3 months doing this, and this, and then you can start speaking, but make a rule to hold back. I don't think that's a bad option, by the way.
Yeah, and
I
it's
actually
basically
like that.
just taking it to the extreme because, like you said, like okay, so when you're speaking Korean, you're probably enforcing a lot of really bad subtle habits that are not bad to the point where it inhibits in communication. But a native probably wouldn't say that, and you're
Well,
not know about that.
there's another problem with Korean though, is that Korean grammar and Japanese grammar are 90% the same. And the problem is that I already know Japanese grammar, so I'll use my rules of Japanese logic in Korean. And see, how many languages do you speak, Matt?
Just Japanese and English.
I highly suggest you learn other languages and see how that fucks you up, because you could do the same thing in another language, and the other forever people ask me, should I learn 2 languages at once? And I would say no, I think you should get good at Japanese first. I would say that to people, and then I went and learned Korean, and I realized that even after being fluent in Japanese, my Korean was affecting my Japanese. Like I'll say things in Japanese, I'll say, "Ya kare wa nunchi ga nai desu yo," and you don't know what I just said, right?
No.
Because what's nunchi? That's the Korean word to say kuki ga yomenai. He has no understanding of he can't read the air, right? So he doesn't have situational awareness. But Korean has this really cool, nice word, nunchi. So for me, I'm thinking my brain is planting a better word in there from Korean. So I don't know. I wonder how AJATT method would help with that.
Well, the thing is that learning Japanese has fucked up my English, and my Japanese and my English.
Yes.
And so I already know, like the way I think about it is that being multilingual is a meta skill separate from your actual language skill.
Yes.
So I think now, like, okay, I've gotten pretty decent at Japanese.
As is teaching. Teaching a language is also a skill, and also you can be fluent in a language, but it doesn't mean you can interpret it. That's also a skill.
Yeah, I think everything's completely separate. And so just like, because basically the way I think about it is that when you're thinking, like when people ask you, like, hey, what language do you think in? No one really thinks in language. We can understand things directly. We can deal with concepts directly. You know when you're hungry, even without saying to yourself, like, hey, I'm hungry right now. And so basically, if you learn a new language, you are now given all these nice, convenient concepts that you didn't have in your native language. And your mind quickly incorporates that into its raw understanding of the world. But then you try to move back into just one of the 2 languages or just one of the 3 languages. And now suddenly there's all these concepts that your mind's familiar with working with that can't easily be expressed in that one language. And it's inhibiting.
One thing I've learned the more now that I'm into Chinese. So I always feel like Japanese, Korean, and Chinese are good sets because they share the roots of kanji. Yeah. But one thing I realized is that there's really a core thing. There's core sets of words you need to learn in the beginning. It's like think, eat, drink, see, look, feel. There's certain things you need to learn to build a base, and then from there you can learn the very nuanced things. In the lower levels of any learning language, you learn these really broad concepts. But then as you learn more and more, you learn concepts that are not used as much but are more powerful. And I think the tendency of some people when they learn is they learn the more advanced version and then they only stick to that version, and they forget that the stuff that they learned early on is actually more powerful. That's a random thought. But the more language that I learn, the more I realize that I start searching for, well, there's this particular nuance in Japanese. How do I get that nuance in Korean? And then now that I'm learning Chinese, I'm thinking, oh, there's this really cool thing in Korean, and I want to say it in Chinese. Like, for example, in English, we just say, I thought today was Monday. We have this one thing. In Japanese, also say, 今日は月曜日だと思った. And they use omo, right? But Korean, we use an entirely different verb when they thought something was true, but it turned out not to be true. And that was a new concept that doesn't exist in Japanese, right? It doesn't exist in English. It turns out that Chinese also does that same thing. So I was able to build off of what I learned in Korean in Chinese, that they have and I right away, I asked the Chinese person, I said, hey, if you thought it was Monday, but it wasn't, what would you say? And it wasn't the I thought pattern that I thought it could be. I had a kind of intuition that it was going to be like Korean, where they had a different way of saying it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I think, because basically the way I think about it is that what language does is it cuts the world up into little pieces, and then it's just a matter of dealing, like, how you serve up those pieces in relation to each other. And so some languages have cut certain things into smaller pieces. Like you just said, okay, in Chinese, they cut this omotta thing into smaller pieces. Now, there's 2 different words. Like, for what is one thing in Japanese are 2 different things in Korean.
Dude, it's so funny because that's literally a graphic in the book where I have like 3 J's, and it has one E and 3 E's and 3 J's, and I explain that sometimes one concept exists in Japanese for 3 in English. It's the other way. It's funny that if you really study language, these are very self-evident facts.
Yeah, and I think that's why it fucks you up, is because once you get accustomed to saying, okay, I don't want this whole piece, I want this more subtle piece, because that's what I'm really experiencing right now. But maybe the language you're dealing with just doesn't have an easy way.
Sometimes you lose fidelity in another language, and it really hurts. It hurts you mentally. You're like, wow, I lost fidelity. Whereas in Japanese, I could say this very nuanced thing. In Korean, they just say this. Why? Why don't they have the nuance?
Yeah, it's basically like you're up by learning multiple languages, you're upgrading your brain's view of the world, but then you have to downgrade when you only use one of those languages, because the way you see the world is like a conglomerate of multiple languages, right? And so every time you speak, you have to downgrade yourself a little bit, because unless you're speaking with someone who knows all of those languages, which is why I love talking to people who are bilingual in Japanese and English, because then I'll just throw in Japanese words here and there.
Well, you'll really enjoy learning Korean, Matt, now that you're fluent in Japanese.
Yeah, if it doesn't fuck me up too much. Well, that's why I'm saying right now I want to develop my meta skill of being bilingual first.
Well, really, all you have to do is, a good start is to learn the way that they read the kanji. It's just like learning additional readings for the kanji. And then you can make up words. You can pull them out of the air. I've done it so much in Korean. Even in Chinese, I've been able I've learned 200 or 300 kanji for the simplified Hanzi. I can just randomly think, oh, I need this word here. What is it in Korean? What is it in Japanese? It's probably the same in Chinese. I can just I just apply a different reading and a tone to it. It's really fun. I highly recommend it. And I don't think you need to wait.
Well, it's just a matter of, like you said,
your Japanese is excellent. There's no needing for you to wait. I mean,
no, I'm saying just the developing the meta ability of keeping Japanese and English separate in my head and like avoiding interference. But
yeah, I don't know if that's possible.
I don't know either, but
because I've been married for 22 years with my wife, and I still fuck up and say a Korean word to her. It's really stupid. You would think that my brain knows this is my Japanese wife, who, by the way, doesn't speak English, which is crazy. I don't know how you can live in America this long and not, but she doesn't. Yeah, and I'll still end up and I'll say, like, normally the beginning of sentences where I'll fuck up. If I've been speaking a lot of Korean recently, or if the topic becomes Korea, yeah, that's when it really hits. Sometimes if I come back from Japan and I've been driving in Japan, and then I talk about Japan while I'm driving over here, I'll go to the wrong side of the road. It's like that. Your brain says Japan.
Yeah, the brain might just not be really built to keep them that separate. I kind of have a theory that people who are bilingual, like from birth, who are like raised with 2 languages, are just better at that meta ability of keeping them apart, because like when they were a kid, their brain just realized, like, okay, there are different languages.
Maybe
kind of adjusted
maybe
it.
I have 2 daughters that are bilingual, and I would argue that that's probably not the case.
They get just as mixed up in their head.
When they don't know a Japanese word, they just make it sound like katakana and they throw it in, which is what I recommend to people to do anyway, because a lot of times Japanese will understand it. If you didn't know how to say akai, you just say retto and they'll get it. It's like that kind of a thing. Most of the time Japanese know because they've learned English, but they just need to hear it in the Japanese accent, and they end up doing that a lot when they don't know it. My older daughter is much better than my younger daughter, because my younger daughter was around my older daughter who spoke English. My youngest daughter, we only spoke Japanese to. She didn't know Japanese when she started school, or English when she started school. The youngest one did, though. So that probably contributes to her not being as good in Japanese.
Naruhodo ne.
Well,
anyway, it sounds like we agreed on a lot of stuff. Unless we want to like go over this, it would be cool to talk about kanji. Lastly, if we unless there's any more points about the method. So
I'll tell you, I really like the concept, and I think I can't. Here's the thing: once you learn a concept, you can't ignore it, right? So I can't imagine me start talking about what I learned about AJAT from Matt, right?
Yeah.
Say,
by the way, we normally call it AJAT, just so you know.
AJAT. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I keep saying the whole thing with AJAT. I feel like a better name would be better, because it's just one language applies to that, but it can apply for all languages. It should be ALAT, or something like that. All language. I don't know. There should be a better name, but
I just inherited it from Katsumoto, so
yeah. I've heard about him forever. Everyone always asks me what I think about him, and I've never. The only understanding I have of him is I went to his webpage, and it was completely wow, was it complicated to look at.
I have a video just on that. How basically it's a long story, but yeah, I don't think of him as a saint at all by any long shot.
Yeah, his website was and to me, I feel like this is of course the first explanation I've ever heard of all Japanese all the time. But I didn't disagree that all Japanese all the time was a bad thing. I just didn't understand the no output, which I think I think it's very fascinating to do that. I'm going to try it. Why not?
Yeah, and it kind of goes with like Stephen Krashen. He's like a linguist who's like basing off his like, cause what his basic idea is that, like I was saying before, like acquisition and learning is different. I could teach you, like for example, there's a lot of like Chinese immigrants in the U.S., right? Who like maybe they'll still say like, here, $5.03, and they can't put an S on the end of their thing to make it plural. But for some of them, if you stopped and asked them like what way was correct with the S or not, they could probably tell you that it was, because consciously they know the rule, just they haven't acquired it. And so when they're not consciously like on the lookout and consciously thinking about rules, then it just doesn't come out that way, because their unconscious model of the language that you use when you're not consciously thinking about it doesn't like have that feature of, okay, when things are plural, you add an S. And so what he says is, learning you can do many different ways, like you said, but acquisition, that the true, like the growing of your unconscious intuitive understanding of language, only happens in one way. It's when you understand messages in the language. And so it's not through speaking. Speaking, you're just using what you already know. If you like, in order to actually grow what you know, then you only do that through input. And so conversation is still input because you're listening to what the other person says. But what Ajat says is that actually a conversation is kind of a bad form of input, because if you're going to have to speak right after the other person, your mind's going to be filled with, oh crap, what do I say next? What do I say next? And you can't truly focus on the nuance of their word choice or whatever. But if you're just watching a TV show, you don't have to talk. So you can just focus and just become like a scientist in terms of Japanese and actually learn it through the thing.
I would argue against my own method and say that the way that I teach is very selfish. And I say what you want to say, learn to say the things that you want to say. And I'm not telling them to listen to what people are saying and learn I do say that you could say, I only want to learn this one way because that's the way that I say, but you can't do that because you have to learn the other way. If there's 3 ways to say something, you have to know the 3 ways because someone else might use the other way. So I do teach them that, but I focus I think my way of teaching is mainly saying, speak, say what you want to say, because in my mind, when I travel to places, I'm like, I'm going there to speak. I'm very extroverted. So I go to language meetups and I purposely get into heated conversations about religion or politics, just so I can have a good back and forth with somebody. And I even recommend people, hey, if you're okay with it, start something heated so you can get real level speaking going on, but learn to say your points so that you can keep the conversation going. And I also teach about redirection, where if you didn't understand everything that they said, take what you did understand and redirect the conversation that way. So I think my method is exactly opposite of your method in terms of, you're like, no, understand what they say, and that will help you be able to say what you want to say.
So here I'm gonna post an image in the chat. Tell me if you can see it. It's I made it one day. It's a really shitty illustration. It's just really simple. Can you see it just with the circles?
Yes.
Where it's kind of like, okay, and the little circle in the middle is what a native speaker, what you could say, and it wouldn't sound weird for a native speaker to say that. It's like completely 100% true, like what someone born and raised in Tokyo would say. Yeah. And then on the outermost ring, we just have all sounds. Yes. And then so with the pink ring, it's okay. It's deviating from true native Japanese, but they're still going to understand you. So yes. I think when you take your method, it's just through the fact of because you're going to get correct. Like if you,
I don't disagree. No, I'll tell you exactly what you're saying. This is I understand what you're saying. You're saying this is what Japanese people say. Ah, wakaru, yutteru koto ga wakaru. But no one wants to hear that. No one wants to be understood because they said enough sounds that made sense. They want to be understood because they're native level, and that's that yellow dot, right?
Yeah, and so and it's even more. I mean, you can have Japanese people stop saying that even when you get closer to that, right? Like if you just have really real subtle things like just due to your word choice, like that word's still used, but maybe Japanese person. Like I remember I used to read a lot, so I would say things like choetsuru, like in just casual conversation. And then I know sometimes Japanese people would be like, okay, yeah, I totally get what you mean, but we probably wouldn't say that. So it sounds a little bit off. And just things like, so it's like, it's very extremely subtle because language is so exact the way that native speakers use it.
Well, this is another thing that I argue about. I said, like, some people are not comfortable. Okay, you have to speak Japanese in a style that works for you. For example, I'm extroverted and I am aggressive. So my Japanese style doesn't go to, させていただきたいのですが, I'm never going to say that. I'm never going to say what a native timid person might say.
Yeah,
that always has a method of always requiring permission to do things. I'm like, I'm going to do this thing. That's my style. And that's what I try to teach people. I say, speak to to what you want to say. And I also am a big fan of saying, don't be Japanese, be American. That's my style. I'm not going to be a Japanese person when I speak because that's not who I am.
Well, I mean, I mean, not that there's a right or wrong, but I just think that's just where our goals differ. Because I think that like the only people who speak Japanese are Japanese people. And so if you like your final goal, like if you are just doing something that would just like it would, a Japanese person probably wouldn't do. Like, and because there's many different Japanese people, right? There's a big spectrum. There's different personalities the same way. Just the averages on certain personality traits are different, right? And so I still think that, okay, if you're outgoing and aggressive, like say that you're 10% more aggressive and outgoing than the average person in America. But I think you should still be 10% more aggressive and outgoing than the average person in Japan. But that's going to be less outgoing because Japanese people are less outgoing in general. But that whole layer of kind of what the average personality is like kind of part of the language and culture.
Well, over time, if let's say that for example, what I learned, I learned this very quick in Korea, that the style of humor that I had that was based on the level that was acceptable in Japan for perversion. Japanese can be very perverted in their jokes. They're very open to hentai type things. They're okay with it and they laugh at it. Whereas the Koreans that I initially encountered were very conservative, and even just saying an oppai joke or some sort of sexual innuendo wouldn't fly with them, and they got offended. The funny thing is, once my Korean improved, I realized that wasn't the case. It was when my Korean sucked. They didn't like that a person that didn't speak fluent Korean was saying really bad things. It's like if you don't know a lot of Japanese, but you're saying chin chin manko, chin chin manko nametai, you're saying shit like that. Well, of course, that's really offensive, and you shouldn't say that early on in your learning language, right? It's like I tell people, like, until your Japanese is good, don't go, because you're not going to sound natural. You're like, ano, etto. Don't throw in Japanese ums and ahs until you're good at Japanese, because it just sounds forced. So it's the same. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. It basically,
I think that's what I was saying.
Yeah. Well, because like basically, whenever you're communicating with someone, you're to say it in a kind of perverse way. You're wanting them to experience certain things, right? Like because we're all kind of subtly manipulative, right? Like if you're saying a joke, you're trying to get them to experience humor and amusement and get them to laugh, right? Good call it a form of manipulation in like a really low key way. And so basically, it's like, Japanese people have a different sense of humor. And so if you want to make Japanese people laugh, you're going to have to learn how to be funny in a Japanese kind of way. And that's not really, it's not that you're not being yourself anymore. It's that like you kind of have to make a new, it's like the you that's
Yes.
that's at the beneath the surface level of your most obtuse personality traits, like that, like you as an American person isn't really you, right? You are more like your core values and
I've talked about this,
your
but every
disposition.
language there's a different person. There's an English George, there's a Japanese George, there's a Korean George, and there's a Chinese George for me. And over time, you get, as your language level increases, more of it's not, the thing is, you can never be the same person again. Once you learn a new language, for me, I've realized every language fundamentally changes who I am. And the Japanese George gets affected by the Korean George, especially the Korean George affecting the Japanese George, because Korea hates Japan. And I went through a period of hating Japan. The Korean affected me so much. The propaganda, the fact that Japan colonized Korea, and I got sick of Japanese people were very tatemae with all of their fakeness in the beginning when you get to meet somebody. And Koreans were, right away, you knew if they hated you or they liked you because they didn't have that layer of social being kind to you, right? But then it flipped. Once I learned Korean and I went back to Japan for an extended period of time, I realized I really do love Japan because they're more kind and they use their social. So now there's a balance of, hey, sometimes you've got to do that just for the nature of humanity.
You have to make a new personality to function well. And that's why, look, one thing I tell people, if you're going to take an AJAP mindset, is like if you find anything that you don't like about Japanese culture for the first like multiple years of your study, assume that you're just not understanding it properly, and that's why you don't like it. Like, because I know I used to think Japanese humor wasn't funny at all, and I just thought I was like a superior human being, and my sense of humor was superior than the whole country. And now I understand that actually I just didn't get it, you know. And I think that's a very valuable attitude to have when you're approaching the culture and the language, even the Tatemai stuff, where it's like if it's probably not as gross as it seems to you now, and that's probably just because you're biased because of your culture, and because your goal should be to communicate successfully with Japanese people, right? That otherwise, why would you be learning Japanese? So
exactly.
you have to have that really kind of humble attitude when you approach their culture, and assume that you just can't. If you don't like it, I mean, eventually it gets to the point where you can have your ski kirai. But at the beginning, just assume that it's your fault. Then you're missing something. But anyway, there was one other point I wanted to make. Same with just about the outputting from the beginning. Is like that when you're doing a lot of outputting, you do get better. But when I have the 3 circle analogy, most of the time the outputting itself can't push you to the yellow circle in the middle once you get into the middle ring, like because it doesn't have any more curative power than that. And so the way to get to the middle ring is through input. Is through studying what Japanese people actually do. And so if your goal when you very first start is to get to the yellow circle, the most efficient way is to forego the whole process of making bad habits and then getting them corrected later and just learn everything right the first time.
I think that's excellent. I actually feel like I've learned something today because of that. The AJAT, sorry. That seems really and if it's only for a period of 3 or 4 months, it's worth doing. It's worth doing to get a better foundation of what you. I mean, I guess I kind of did it with Chinese, but I still was outputting. And I think the problem with outputting so early is it overwrites. Your voice is much louder than the voice you hear from outside.
Exactly.
So it overwrites what you learn.
And one other thing that you could, like, I still think it's okay to output early on, but it's the mindset's different. Because I think normal people have the mindset of if they say something and the other person understood them, then check the box. Okay, put that into the bank of things I can say in the future.
Yep.
But the way I have the mindset of, okay, if you haven't heard a Japanese person say that exact same thing in multiple situations, multiple times, then just have it. It's still a tentative hypothesis in your head. Can you say it? I don't know. They understood me, but still might be unnatural. And just have that in your head, like with like a red like X next to it, saying that, okay, I said this because I'm having a conversation and I needed to express an idea, but I don't know if this is correct or not. And just have that mindset of only truly check.
I agree with this. I'm kind of I used to write a lot of notes in the beginning, and then I realized that if something's important enough, it'll come up again. I'll hear it again. And I accept the fact that the first time I hear something, it might be awesome, but it's not my level yet. And if it's too many things that I don't understand, I just go, you know what? It sounds great. I'm going to kind of mentally check that in my head. And the next 2 or 3 times that I hear it, I'll eventually understand it and I'll reproduce it. And I don't know if that's where you were going with it, but I think that's what I heard when you were saying it.
Yeah. Where it's like the only thing that you have like if you have like different baskets in your head of like what you are confident you can say in Japanese, it's like the basket that is most important, which is I am positive that I can say this and it will be Japanese like this is the things that are in this basket are the same things that are in the basket of native speakers. Those things, you can only put things in that basket if you've heard you've personally heard native speakers say that thing multiple times, not just because a textbook told you that it belongs in that basket. That's not good enough.
I think there's a fundamental flaw though in AJAT. I want to talk about it.
Okay.
The fundamental flaw is most people aren't going to get past that point if they're not interacting with people.
Well,
it's not an inclusive method because when you get on HelloTalk and you make friends, you have to reproduce right away.
Yeah, and okay, well, I'll totally admit that I think that's the biggest flaw of AJAT as well, is that most people literally are not going to be able to do it, and most people quit. Like 90% of the people who try to do it quit, and I admit that that's a flaw, and that's something that I think needs to be modified from here on out. Because basically, the way I view it is that there's kind of a balance say like a spectrum between what is literally the most efficient way to learn the language that you would like if there was like a humanoid robot with infinite willpower and no emotion, what it would do, versus like how much mental suffering it causes you to do that thing, right? So it's like if you put the efficiency up to the max, most people just can't do that because it'd just be sheer suffering, and who wants to do that? And so you kind of have to find I think the ideal method would have it would be more customized to the person, so that you can find like what's the optimal place where of efficiency, but they can still enjoy it and handle it. And
it sounds like the AJAT method works for an introvert who isn't talking to people all the time anyway.
Exactly. That's why I said you have to have a certain personality trait or it won't work. And that is a big flaw.
Whereas me, the very first thing I started learning Russian at one point. The first thing I just went to HelloTalk and added Russian as a language, and I started trying to converse with Russians. And a lot of light bulbs go on the more you see people, like for example, the way Chinese people, when I added Chinese as a language, would say things to me. Oh, I realized, okay, these are the way that they say things, and I just start emulating it. And right away, I feel like I'm making progress. Whereas I think that's the fundamental flaw of AJAT is you can't do it as an extrovert because it's too painful.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you not, like for example, there's no way on earth I could sit here and listen to you explain AJAT without me interjecting like I'm interjecting. There's just no way.
Yeah, and I think that's totally valid, and I think that's something that needs, like, because I mean, Katsumoto was an introvert, obviously. I'm an introvert, obviously, and my friends who succeeded with AJAT are also introverts, and so I think that is a fundamental. I mean, yeah, I guess you could call it a flaw with the method that I think, and I'll admit that, like the way, and I said this the other day, like when I'm thinking about language learning, I'm thinking about it in like kind of a vacuum of like, okay, to the person who has infinite motivation and infinite willpower, what should they do? But no one does have that much motivation or willpower, and so it's not always an effective way. It's like it's good to have that as a model, but then you have to think about of like, because I'd like to. The thing is that when like you have to I think it's different to say like, oh, AJAT is flawed because it doesn't work, and AJAT is flawed because no one could actually do that, or because it's not like putting it into action is too difficult. Not
well, you've proven that it works, and other people have proven that it works.
Yeah, and like if you know, like there's this other guy, Nukemarine, who's like a fond of AJAT philosophy, but thinks it's too hardcore and intense for most people, and he's like working on a way to kind of take the same methodology, but maybe put it in a context that like fixes some of the things you're saying, like lowers the entry barrier and like gives you more positive feedback throughout the process. And I think that is something that like needs to be continued to be improved on. I totally admit that that's like a huge flaw with AJAT, and it's why so few people have gotten it to work.
Earlier, someone was saying they wanted to record it. Was this actually recorded? Because I would love to have a copy of it.
I think Nukemarine was.
Okay, this definitely needs to go up on our channels.
Cool. Yeah, and then we should still talk about kanji, for sure.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, remembering the kanji is like extremely misunderstood by most people, it seems.
By me. Let's just take by me then.
Okay, so
because I saw your video and I know that you believe it's the best thing out there.
So I'll tell you the way that I think about remembering the kanji. So there's people who learn to read kanji without any formal study. Like they just kind of like they'll just make flashcards with like a word on the front, like okay, hitsuyo, and they don't worry about the little strokes or whatever. They just memorize like okay, like almost like a picture, right? They're like okay, yep. This kind of looks like this. It's and it's read hitsuyo, and you just kind of brute force it for a while in the beginning. But after a while, it's like you can, because you know how when you're fluent at reading kanji, your brain doesn't look at all the little strokes. You know, right. Like dyslexia doesn't affect kanji reading because people view each character.
I'm glad you said that, because I've had students that with dyslexia. I actually talked about this in my stream, but the students with dyslexia, they don't have dyslexia in Japanese, and I think that has to do with the fact that the writing or the drawing of kanji is a different part of the brain.
Yeah, it's the other hemisphere.
Yeah.
And so apparently there's like you can get a stroke, and also like you can get a stroke. A Japanese person can get a stroke, and they might lose the ability to read kanji, but still read kana, or the reverse. Apparently that actually happened.
We had a lady needed an interpreter from our company when we used to have interpreting services, and actually her husband needed it. She had a stroke and forgot all English, and she needed an interpreter. He needed an interpreter to talk with his wife, who was fluent in English until the stroke.
Oh, but she still knew Japanese?
Still knew Japanese.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
that is
Because
really
English was
crazy.
obviously in a different. I would never imagine that English would be in a different part of the brain, but maybe it was. I always assumed that. Like I still remember Tagalog that I learned when I went to the Philippines when I was 16, and I always imagined I know it because that part of my brain's always been active, even though I'm not speaking any Tagalog in my life. And I thought that was really weird, but it was a true. I mean, you wouldn't pay, $75 an hour to have someone come help you if it wasn't true. So I always thought that was kind of fascinating. But anyway, continue what you were saying about
Yeah,
kanji.
they're really interesting. But so basically, yeah, so you can learn to read kanji. So basically, the normal process people go through is first they learn it and they actually do memorize all the little strokes. And then through practice, they get to that stage where you're not looking at the strokes. You see it and your brain instantly recognizes that as as one unit, right?
Like we recognize a word in English. Yes.
Yeah. It has a look. It's not. It's
Yep.
just like it. Yeah, your brain just sees this
Well,
one thing as
it's
one
not
picture.
just the kanji. Often it's the kanji following it and the
Yeah.
okurigana that follow it that all become one
Yeah,
pattern.
it's similar to recognizing faces almost, right?
Yes.
And so there are people who learn to read kanji like foregoing the initial period of learning the strokes and just go straight to that, and it's hard at the beginning, but people do it. And they just basically like through context, they're just reading Japanese and they just learn like, okay, this picture is pronounced this picture is pronounced that. And initially I kind of did a version of this, but it's a long story. And I learned how to read pretty much no problem, except kanji that looked similar, like en and midori, I would confuse, and there were some other issues, and I couldn't write out kanji. I couldn't write them out from memory at all, but I could still read them in context in a way, just through practice like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Wait one sec, sorry. But
well, while you're thinking, there's a thing that I do that I haven't seen other books do. In Japanese from Zero, book 4, I added it. It's called Kanji Recognition. And I say, hey, you're learning kanji one by one, but you need to just start recognizing that certain patterns exist. And from this point forward, we're not going to give you furigana, and you might not even know the other kanji in the grouping that we're giving you, but it's awkward to say, so you learn the first 80 kanji in book 3, for example, for Kanken 10, right? Okay. But it's weird for me to give you so when we learn hiragana and katakana in the Japanese from Zero books, we progressively remove the romaji, right? So it's like you'll learn a, i, u, e, o, and then in the next lesson, instead of inu with I, n, u, it would be e, and then nu, right? And then up to lesson 9, eventually, then you know all the hiragana. And I was doing the same thing in book 3 with the kanji, but I realized it's awkward to have half kanji and a half hiragana word that doesn't ever exist. So in book 4, I made a change where I said, these, like ichigatsu, nigatsu, sangatsu, you're never gonna ever see furigana for that. And if I can't think of another one. Let's say ichiwa. Let's say that was like for birds and rabbits. Let's say that was a good example of what I did. I said, you don't know the wa character, but just recognize it here. And from now on out, there'll be no more furigana for it. You just have to know it without learning the kanji. And I always like to tell people, even though our book Kanji from Zero, is heavy in the writing, because people expect that. They expect to have writing components, so the writing components are in there. And even when I learn Chinese, I write everything 5 to 10 times at least, once or twice, even though I already know that kanji in Japanese, or it's easy, I already recognize it without any thought. I do it because I think it's part of the memory process. It's a different part of the brain. But I tell people, you don't have to learn to write kanji. Recognition's all you need, because in a
they're
modern
completely
world,
separate.
if you could just write inu, the computer will tell you what to put there.
Well, it's just like you can read words you don't know how to spell. It's the same thing. It's a totally different process in the brain.
That's a good point. Yes.
But so basically but the interesting thing is, though, is if you just say you learn how to read words and you just accept each word as a picture, what will happen is that just because your brain is like a pattern recognition machine, after a while you can be shown a kanji out of context, and you can kind of you'll know its readings just because you can say like, oh yeah, well that's the character that's in this word, and in this word it sounds like this, and in this word it sounds like this, and it gets to the point where you can come across a new kanji compound of two characters that you already know, and you'll be able to intuitively guess how it's read. Like you intuitively understand onyomi and kunyomi just because you're like, oh yeah, well all the other words that are like this are like this.
It's funny, sometimes you say things and I think this guy has read my books. Because this is exactly what we do in Kanji from Zero. I teach them a bunch of words surrounding the reading instead of focusing on the reading. In the Kanji from Zero video series, which you were watching one of them, I say, look, here's the onyomi, here's the kunyomi, but don't learn the onyomi and the kunyomi. You learn learn that there's multiple readings and these are the words that use those readings. And then you'll notice, say, for example, Sekigaisen no gai or Gaikoku no gai.
Exactly.
And you'll know it because you eventually you learn it. I try to teach the instinct that typically if kanji are grouped together, they're going to be one reading. And when they're grouped with hiragana, they're going to be another reading. But that's not always the case, but most of the time it is. And you try to give them an instinct for the learning instead of saying, learn this word and this is the only word that exists. It's not in a vacuum. And then I also, I'm not a fan of radicals being so made important, because radicals often, and I point this out in multiple examples in Kanji from Zero, I say, look at this radical. Does it make any sense that this radical is used here? No, it doesn't. And books like Chinesey make it seem like every kanji has a story, right? Every kanji has a story, where that story might have existed in the past for most kanji, but it doesn't exist now. Like the way that makura is written with a tree, right?
Yeah,
because they used to be made of wood. That makes sense, but not every kanji does that. A lot of times, the original kanji, the radical was chosen just because it had the same sound. It has nothing to do with the meaning, and that's a problem with learning. Not that it's a bad thing to know. It's a good thing to distinguish that sometimes you have suihen and sometimes you have ningban, and it makes sense to remember a similar kanji because that's water related and that's human related.
Okay. So we agree that you can, like, learning to just, if you want to read kanji, then so basically I just have this claim that if you can learn how to read words, just like brute force it without actually breaking down the kanji at all, you'll learn to recognize them. And if you learn how to read enough words, you'll be able to intuitively understand how kanji readings work and predict the reading of.
I don't disagree with that. That's usage is the mother of fluency.
Yeah, so this is what I call the in-context method, because you're just learning to read kanji in context. You're just learning words, and you're not worrying about breaking them down. And I know a lot of people who have done this, and they've reached a high level of reading comprehension. The downsides to this approach are that you're not going to be able to write out kanji from memory, because recognition doesn't imply the ability to recall from memory, just like you can read a word and you might not know how to spell it. And also, you're probably going to confuse similar-looking kanji like midori and en out of context.
Right, but you can learn those specific things.
Yeah. But so basically, then, like, if you take something like Wanikani, that's like a more traditional approach, it's like the exact opposite of that. They're going to teach you everything out of context. They're going to teach you the character. They're going to teach you the readings. So that's the extreme opposite end.
And they're going to give crazy names to the radicals that don't exist in Japanese.
Yeah, but
they're going to say fat lady radical.
Yeah, but why? Okay, so
I'm just saying, I'm aware of what Wanikani does.
Yeah. RTK does that too, but I'll get to that. I don't think that's really a problem. So basically,
let me say something here. Let me just add. I was very anti that system, and I was very anti mnemonics. And the first version of Japanese from Zero, Kanji from Zero, does not have mnemonics. But the next version that comes out, I went heavy on mnemonics. But because I think mnemonics are personal, I think that I opened up spots in every kanji box to allow people to come up with their own version.
Awesome. Then you're going to love RTK.
I know exactly what I keep in mind. I did a review on RTK. I know what RTK is.
Okay.
Well, I have a copy of RTK.
Well, you have to have it in the context of AJAT, right? Which is basically saying, so the real...
I just don't agree. I don't agree that... I think it's a parlor trick to know how to... What do? You're going to look at a book and say, I understand these, but I can't read them? I think that's the part that I disagree with.
Yeah, so let me try to explain it. So basically, you know how you were talking about how once someone points out a grammar point to you and just like tells you that it's a thing, suddenly it's a lot easier to grasp, and then every time you hear it, you can, like, it makes sense, and then you can learn more and more from it. Mm-hmm. So I call this the concept of a mental dictionary entry. And it's just this really basic idea that it's easier to learn more about things that you already know than to learn something completely new. And in my video on RTK, I used the example of, if I told you that the word apple meant a really hot chick, that would be pretty easy for you to remember. But if I told you that the word like Grabasgruvström or something, some random global of sounds, meant the same thing, that would be a lot harder to remember, because you already have an entry for apple in your head, but not for that other blob of sound. So you're associating something that you don't know with something that you already know versus something that you don't know with something that you don't know. And so it's like, it takes a lot more work for your memory. So basically, what RTK does is, in a very efficient fashion, it tells you how to write each character and gives you a very rough understanding of what it means. It's not very nuanced at all. It's just like, okay, here's a word that like kind of means. But now you have a dictionary entry in your head for every kanji. So now when you come across a kanji and when you're reading, it's not just a blob anymore, it's that character. So then you can pick up the in context approach and just begin learning words, but it's going to be a lot easier to store information about them because now you have a place to put that information in your head. It's that this kanji has this reading, and then through just using through repetition and actual.
But see, you don't know the reading at that point.
Yeah, but you're learning.
It's a lot more taxing. It's a lot more taxing to have to go back again and then learn the reading. Why not
you never learn the readings out of context. You take the in context approach we were talking about before, where you just start learning words and you don't worry about the individual readings. You just like you do AJET, so you're just learning words as they actually come up, like in Japanese.
But you're not learning words. You're learning how to recognize a picture and know the English meaning in its head.
No. I'm saying
after that. But I'm saying that the problem I have with RTK, and the reason why I think it deserves its 4-star reviews, is that you look at RTK, and until the second book, you don't get readings. So you do a lot of treading on water, where it's cool that you understand what it means, but you can't do anything with it.
Yeah. No, okay, first of all, I don't think anyone should do RTK 2. I think it's a waste of time. I think that, and your initial criticism is valid because, like, if you're doing RTK alone, you haven't gained very much at all. You have nothing to show for it. But that's not the point. The point is you've just invested for the future because now once you start learning through context, like, and you actually start learning Japanese, you're going to have a really easy time learning all the additional readings and the nuanced meaning and everything else because now you have a dictionary entry for each one kanji in your head. So it's not, RTK by itself isn't a complete thing. It's half the process of learning to read kanji. It's a big investment. But with RTK, due to how efficient it is, in 3 months alone, you can get a dictionary entry in your head for the 2,000 most common kanji. That's incredible. That's way faster pace than any other book or any other method.
How do you know that?
Well, what other?
What I'm saying is, how do you know that the other ways aren't just as fast with a dedicated person willing to put 3 months of time in? Because 3 months of time is 90 days, right? And divide that by 2,000. Someone help me with the math on that. How many kanji is that per day?
Normal. I think like around
2,000 divided by 90 is 22. You're telling me that a dedicated person with any shit book, and I say shit because there's a lot of shit books out there, couldn't learn 22 in a day?
No, well, they wouldn't be able to retain it. Like after, like, because you gotta keep remembering what you.
That's right.
Know.
I have to remember that the RTK breaks up the parts. It teaches you things that aren't actual kanji. They teach you parts of the kanji, and then shows you how they're used within the other kanji. It gives you a story.
But well, at the beginning they give you stories just to show you what they should be like. But really, it's encouraging you to make your own stories with the parts. But those are, I mean, that's just a pragmatic end. Just by making the like it's easier to work with mnemonics. By even if they're telling you like, hey, this isn't a real radical, but if you just pretend that this thing means.
Yes, I'm a full fan of that now, and that's the delay for my Kanji from Zero Book 2 coming out, is that every kanji has been broken up, and we're assigning. Where the thing I'm trying not to do is have fantastic names for them. I'm trying to have realistic names for them, like fishhook, instead of whatever.
I mean, it doesn't really matter either way because it's just a pragmatic end. It's just what's easier to remember.
Well, actually, the crazier way seems to be easier to remember.
And
that's why I give people the ability. That's why I encourage people to come up with their own way first.
Yeah.
Well, we show the kozo of the kanji. And it just part plus part plus part. And then I went a little bit overboard. I wish I could show it to you on screen, but I can't. I've done it in videos before where I show that there's multiple mnemonics now in each book, and there's specific rules for those mnemonics. But it's an optional thing because I'm not a fan of mnemonics. Although
but the kanji are like the thing about RTK is that the kanji are presented in order that makes learning them with mnemonics really easy because they build off each other.
Sure.
And yeah, the downside of this is that you're going to learn some uncommon kanji early on and some common kanji not until the end. But I
still think that the problem with AJAT and the problem with the RTK is it requires a completely dedicated person. And it's like this. I can be rich. A certain type of person will be rich doing Amway, even though it's a shitty business model, because they're dedicated to the cause. So I don't know. I think that the type of people that choose AJAT, the people in here, I've been reading the comments from time to time where they say, how many more people, right? Yoga Pantsu says, that we need to compare the two groups and who speaks better. Well, the people that are willing to do the more difficult system are completely better because they're more dedicated people. The people that do my system are much more. The people that do my system are probably much more lazy, and they're casual. They're the housewives. They're the people that like watching someone talk about it. They live vicariously through the video of me speaking English and teaching them cool, fun facts about Japanese, and then they learn how to say "kore wa enpitsu desu," and they're happy. And they buy my book.
Okay.
And they're like me, where I buy books that I don't read, and my pretty books sit on their shelf.
Okay, but that's the thing is I'm totally willing to accept that. But you're all, at the same time, you got, like, if you're saying, yes, I admit that this way.
Hang on. Shut up, Silverson. Come on.
I'm not reading the chat, by the way.
He said my books are for lazy people. Quoted by George.
Okay.
If you want to see some of my quotes, go to George Trombley on Twitter. Someone has made a whole bunch of my shitty quotes. So go ahead and add that one. Go ahead. Sorry.
But so if you're saying, okay, I'll admit that RTK, like if we're dealing with robots, RTK is the better choice, but it's not realistic because it requires a very specific kind of person, and it's hard to find those people. I'm totally willing to buy that argument.
Well, hang on, but all that says is that not everybody learns the same way.
Well, yeah, but you have to be you have to be subtle when you make that argument. If you're saying not everyone learns the same way because, like, some people don't have they're not introverted enough to spend enough time studying, and they're not have enough raw motivation to work very hard without any gratifying results. Like, I'm willing to buy that, but it's different than some people. Some people make it sound just like, oh no, I'm a visual learner, so that doesn't work for me. I'm an audio learner, and it's
you're right. There's a lot of people that self-defeat. I'll give you that. I yell at my friend all the time for that. So you can do it if you think you can.
Yeah, because I think, like, if I can see that we can come to an understanding where, yeah, we're catering to different people. Like, someone has to do what I'm doing, right? Because there are a minority of people who want to take it to the extreme, and they're willing to do whatever it takes. That, like, past me, like me 5 years ago when I first started, that was me. All I cared about was, I was like, okay, if I can sacrifice everything else in my life to get amazing at Japanese, I'm willing, like, deal. And there's other people like that, and so that's my job. My job, I don't see myself as, like, trying to take over the world, and this is what everyone should do it. So if you're saying, like, okay, yeah, that way is the best way for this one particular goal, but since it's not applicable to people who aren't crazy, basically, because I'm totally willing to admit I was crazy, and anyone else who can make HAT work is crazy in a way, and so I'm doing a technically less efficient method that's more palatable to a large majority of people, then yeah, I'm totally willing to buy that. But it's this, you're admitting that you're making the sacrifice of sheer efficiency for palatability.
Yeah, I am. I don't think there's any way around it because, first of all, I never thought about the AJAT method until we talked about it today. And because
if so, we have a perfect understanding. Because I totally get that a lot of people need exactly the product that you're creating and are totally happy with it, and there's no problem with that at all.
Yeah, I'm trying. I don't want to have good quotes here, but the reality is, there is a market for the type of books that I sell. Obviously, I'm selling a ton of books. But I think there's also a market for a book that teaches the AJAT method and talks about it.
Yeah, well, that's just my YouTube channel and my Patreon, in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's cool that what I'm doing now, because I definitely, it's like, Patreon wasn't around in Katsumoto's day, and so that's basically the reason he failed, is because no one wants to do this for free. It's too much work to do it for free. You know how much work this stuff is.
Yes, I do.
And so you have to, before Patreon, you had to create a product, right? And to Katsumoto, he created products that no one needed because he needed money. And that's where it all went to shit. But with Patreon, you don't have to create a product. You can just say, like, hey, if you like me, just send me some money. And everyone wins in a way.
I don't disagree. I started Patreon, but I'm probably going to stop doing Patreon. I think you're earning $100 more than me a month on Patreon.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I'm proud of is my ratio to subscribers on YouTube to Patreon money is, like, off the charts. Like, not that I'm getting that much.
No, okay, but for you started probably really early on in your channel. With a channel like mine, where I've never had a Patreon, and I have textbooks and a website where they can funnel money to me if they want to, and where I say, hey, if you want to support, get the book, because that's where the money comes in. So it's definitely something I've tied it to Yes Japan membership now. Like if you get the $6 support, you get Yes Japan, which is actually cheaper. It's cheaper to get Yes Japan through Patreon than getting it at the actual website. I don't know why I made it that way, but I did. But I don't know. I haven't really put a lot of time into Patreon. That's probably where you put a lot more time in.
Well, I have this this chat room going on, which I think is pretty cool.
Whereas my chat room tends to be me popping in every now and then, but mostly it's dedicated people that care about the language and they're helping students. I'm not in there all the time. I spend a lot of my time on live streams and making videos.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's kind of the nature of having a way bigger audience, where my audience is just small enough where I can just interact with them directly every day and answer all the questions that get asked. But
get ready for more of what happened when you went on Reddit.
Yeah.
Because I got shot on Reddit too. And it's rough. It makes you really start doubting yourself as a human being. Your video destroyed me this morning, for the record.
Sorry about that.
It's only because, look, I'm open to criticism, and it wouldn't destroy me if I thought you were a complete shit and you weren't hitting on a good nerve, then maybe it wouldn't have hit me. But I think it was a very complicated way that I got affected. It's like, number one, you said it in such a good way that it's like, it's got to be true. How could you learn from a guy that doesn't read novels? And I wasn't aware of your level at that time, but I imagine it must have been good for you to say that. And then the other thing that I think that hurt was, it's like, at the end of that video, I agreed with that exact compliment, with that exact saying. I said, that's why even though I was ranting over a YouTube comment, even though I hated that person said that, I still said, look, I'm going to go buy a book. You're right. I should be reading more Japanese books. It's not below my capability. It's just a pain in the ass for me. I should be reading more Japanese books. So I think that's what hurt me a little bit, was that, and it also discounted everything else I had ever done.
Yeah, like that was the thing. Like in hindsight, the reason why I decided to remove the video is because, like, we just had this kind of nuanced discussion about how people have different goals, and so they have different needs. And there's people that have, and I do, if you just watch the video, it makes it sound like everyone, like no one has the need that you're catering to, and everyone should have the need I'm catering to, which is like not the reality of the situation at all.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I would have never asked you to take it down, and I even was like, why am I even commenting on here? I'm just fueling it. It's like Streisand effect. If I want to ignore it, I need to actually ignore it. But I actually think your channel will be big, and eventually that video would hurt me.
Yeah, and I just also, just like personally, I kind of just thought about it for a while and realized, like, I don't want to be that guy who like profits off. Like, I don't want to be that guy who's just talking shit about other people all the time. I realized, like, I want to change, because I've kind of found that in general, the best way, like, telling people to change their mind is not a very good way to have them change their mind. The best way to have people change their mind is to just talk to your audience as if they already get you, and then some people that like enters their ears from the side, and they kind of just start to doubt themselves out of like fear of missing out, and they're just kind of like, man, this guy kind of makes sense. He kind of seems to know what he's talking about. Maybe I should give it a listen. Whereas if you just go, hey, you're wrong, let me tell you what's right, they just shut down and put up their guards.
Well, start a battle. If you watch my rant eventually on your thing, I go back and forth from saying bullshit to, but Matt's a great guy, and I don't think what he's saying is wrong. I go back and forth because it's conflicting for me. It's like, you are good, you are great in Japanese, and that's not a fact that I could deny. I think the thing that hurts me the most is I, as a creator, you are a creator, I am a creator. We are doers. We are alpha. We're not the guy that doesn't do anything. We've done things. To take a negative push on someone else's work, like, for example, Japanese Ammo by Misa. I subscribe to her I support her also on Patreon, even though she's my exact nemesis, right? And the thing that she's producing way more than me, and it hurts me every day when I see a new video from her, but I'm never going to talk negative about her. I might poke fun at her approach to the way she speaks, like, hello, Japanese Ammo Misa here. I might do that, but I'm not going to say her method is bad.
Yeah.
Same thing with Japanese Pod 101. I'll I'll talk about how cute Risa is, but I'll never say their method's great, but also never say they're a bad way to learn, because I have a respect for what Innovative Language Systems has done as a company. They out Yes Japan to me. I was the first site like that, and then they came around and did a better version of it. And then they came around and did different languages when I was just sitting there, holding my balls, because I didn't react fast enough. And I never had the business acumen to do the way that they did. So I think that's it. Even then, I still don't. I'll say I hate Japanese Man Utah, but I only hate him because he's fucking amazing. That's why I hate him, because it hurts me inside to look at a guy that's doing something that I'm not doing.
I don't know if you saw the final comment on our thread on that video I made before I took it down, but what I basically said that I realized in hindsight was, like, when I made that video, I wasn't thinking of you as a human being. All I saw was an opportunity to help my own means, and I just kind of, I mean, not consciously, I kind of just like unconsciously assumed, like, oh yeah, he's just this big channel, I'm just a little ant compared to him, and nothing I can do can really hurt him.
Oh gosh, no. First of all, I don't think I'm a big channel. I mean, it's growing, but I'm very well aware that the other channels are way bigger than me, and I don't imagine I'll ever get to 500,000 like Japanese Man Utah. In my dreams, I would get there.
Well, like just the other day, I was helping out at this Japanese related event near me, and because my little brother who's still in high school, his high school was competing in this Japan Bowl Champion thing, and I got to meet my high school Japanese teacher who I hadn't seen in 5 years. And we were talking, and he was like, and we were talking about YouTube, because I was telling him I do YouTube, and he was like, "Oh yeah, do you know that guy Japanese from Zero? I show my videos to the class. Show his videos to the class sometimes. And he explains stuff well." So I guess that was just a week ago. So in my head, I guess I was like, "Oh yeah, this is some big guy that even people in real life know."
Oh, I mean, I get recognized when I go places, even though there's only 87,000.
But I'll admit, it was just totally my fault that I didn't see you as a human. I just saw you as a tool to my means. And
you're an awesome guy, Matt.
Thanks, dude.
You're an awesome guy, because I was saying that you're saying what I wanted you to realize, because I think I said it in my comment too. It's like, look, it hurt me that you said those things, and you didn't say malicious things, for the record. I don't want anyone to think you were saying like, this guy's a hack. I think the face that you made when I said I never read a book, like, if I was a smarter businessman, I should have never said that. But I talk too much on live streams. I've said really dumb things, which is why there's that Twitter of me saying dumb things. It comes out. I might as well be the Trump of speaking, learning Japanese.
Yeah.
So,
but you were in my mind, you were totally interchangeable with any of the other big mainstream YouTubers. Because the only point I want to get across is because I don't know if you I had a video on my channel where I interview someone who who was past me, in the sense of he was ready to give his life for Japanese. But right. He picked up inefficient methods. And one of the things he did was he went through all your course material and stuff. And then he went and got a BA in Japanese, and then he studied for the JLPT. And it took him 3.5 years of doing that and not getting.
That's the video on the JLPT. They're specifically talking about my method being ineffective.
Well, he doesn't. It's only just 5 minutes. He just goes through his whole life, and he says, okay, first I started on YouTube. I watched everything and memorized everything on the Japanese from Zero channel, and then I went and did this and this, and then I went and got a BA, and then I went to Japan, and it's just him just documenting his journey. But he's like, okay, I've just got N1. I've been studying my ass off every single day for 4 years, and I still only understand 80% of anime when I watch it. And so there's people like him, right, who they want AJET, right? They want to get that to that really high level, but they don't realize that what's going on here, where you're basically catering to a more mainstream audience, and it's not really fit for that.
But see, I never thought of that way. I mean, I want you to understand that I never said, okay, let me cater to the audience of people that are this way. I was like, let me make Japanese easier to learn. When I started teaching Japanese in 1997, I looked for books. I picked up Japanese for Busy People. I picked up, I looked at Yoko. So I looked at a bunch of books, and they were either way too fast or way too simple. And I thought, I've got to write something. So I just started writing lessons. And organically, when I taught one thing, it felt like the next thing should be this, because it connects to that. Like you teach nan desu ka, and then of course you would learn kore wa nan desu ka, and then you have to understand how wa works. And then of course, if you know that, you can do dore, kore, sore, are, and now you know how to do koso ado words. And it just kind of made sense pattern-wise. I never thought, all right, master plan, let me write a book. It was
Yeah,
no.
I'm not really criticizing you for that. I'm almost like, if I was going to criticize anyone, it would be criticizing that guy to not doing his research and saying like, okay, like what is the path to get from where I am now to my final goal? People just get started without really having any vision to how what they're going to do first is going to eventually connect to the end goal. But it's like, for me, when I first got serious about learning Japanese, I just happened to find AJAT, and I just happened to start this thing, and it turned out to be really great for me. But I just consider myself really lucky that I found that when I did. And if that other guy who I interviewed found AJAT, he probably would be similar to the same level that I'm at right now. And so when I made that, like, my only purpose when I made the video was just like, man, how do I get more people to, like, because the people who are basically in the spot of they are willing to put in the work, but they're putting in the work in like an unideal way. How do I, like, get them to me? How do I, like, how do I attract the people who would like me if they found me? And I just saw that as an opportunity of like, oh, cool, I can make this video. It'll make it sound really like, okay, you need hardcore methods to get to a hardcore level. And plus my video will probably get posted on the side of his video, get a bunch of views. And I was totally self-centered. I didn't think about you as a person at all.
I was surprised that you took it down, and that's why I don't know if you got the message that I sent in YouTube. I said, hey, I wasn't commenting with the idea of you taking it down. I get why you did the video. I can't prevent let's say I prevent you from having that video. I can't prevent the next guy from having a video that says a similar comment.
No, I took it down entirely due to my moral code, because once I realized that I had the potential to that what I was doing was hurting your channel, even if it was just a little bit, and it was because I was presenting you unfairly, like, then that I just don't want that. That just didn't sit right with me. I don't want to benefit off of hurting other people. I want to benefit in a way that everyone benefits. And that's
well, I appreciate that. Policy. It was unexpected, and it does show that you have a moral character. And I hope to be that same guy too. I wish. Well, let me know when you watch that video. Just let me know if you think it's too much. And I don't remember if it came off that way. I say good things about you. I actually go to your Patreon. I tell people don't slam Matt. Matt's a good guy. I understand why he did it. He's not saying anything that's false. So, because there was people in my own chat room saying, kill him, burn him with fire kind of stuff. And I'm like, we don't need to start a civil war. Matt is just saying what he believes is true. Everyone has their beliefs. But then I went through your intro video and I shat on it in parts. And I think you should watch it. And let me know.
Yeah, I'll watch it.
And I will let you make the decision. Because you took down that video, I'll let you make the decision if I should put it up. I actually think it would help your channel.
Yeah. It's like any publicity. What's the phrase? Yeah.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah. So I'm guessing I'm gonna feel that way, but yeah, I'll watch it and let you know.
And actually, it's the last rant that's ever going to go on Japanese from Zero, because I moved off to I have another channel called Polyglot George, where this was a bad timing for your video, because I'm just now coming off of a lot of negative comments on a few videos that I had released that were like vlog style. And I since I was away, I was like in Taiwan and Korea and Japan for the last 45 days. I was only doing vlog videos, and people are like, this channel used to be about teaching Japanese, now it's about vlogs and drama. And I was getting a lot of negativity on that. So it came at a time right at the end of that where I was like, I don't want to change my channel. I don't want to split videos off. It's my channel. Fuck you all. I'll do what I want. But then I kind of came to the conclusion that, yeah, I get what they're saying. And I had to admit that I was kind of wrong, that the channel should be pure teaching Japanese. It would be like you having videos on what you think about, I don't know, creams in the shower or shampoo in the shower. Why do you have a video on shampoo and this is an AJATT or AJAT channel? It's like that. And I think what happens is when you get a big channel, you feed into the hype that people like you, and that anything you do will be accepted, but that's actually not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard both ways, because one of the things, like, I was just listening to the H3H3 podcast with PewDiePie, and he was just saying how the reason why people's channels die out is because they don't change up their content and they just do the same thing over and over, and then people get bored of it. And so you kind of have to change. But of course, whenever you make a change, everyone cries and whines about it.
Well, you'll never make everyone happy.
Yeah. For sure. I'm finally, I'm noticing that more and more as I slowly get more viewership.
Because here's the thing, Matt. The crazy thing is, when I started doing the vlogs, my subscription rate almost doubled. and I was like, holy shit. And then I took it maybe too far. There needs to be a balance where I'm still releasing educational and I'm releasing like I'll still release vlog stuff, but it can't be about Korea. It's on the Japanese channel. It has to be about Japan. And I think that's what I realized. Like people, I'm fascinated by languages, but a lot of people just want to learn Japanese, especially the ones that are on my channel. They're not expecting. The true fans are like, whatever you create, I'm going to love you, but you can't feed into that either. And you can't become a caricature of yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like I'm going to have to deal with that too. Because I'm kind of still small enough where I can just kind of do whatever I want, even if it's not totally relevant. And, well, some people will speak up, but yeah, I kind of recognize that, if I'm making a commitment to bring this side of content to people.
Well, I think until you get to, like, I'm not big at all. I'm only 87,000. But at a point, it's like you can't listen to there's a small vocal few that will make you feel like shit. But you can't listen to them. And I'm so guilty of most of my rants are against people in the comments saying something that I don't want to hear. And it's it's a balance, man, because sometimes that becomes really good content when I rant at them and people enjoy it and it turns into something positive in the end. But other times people are like, oh my God, are you dealing with trolls again? Ignore them.
Yeah.
And fuck Reddit.
Oh yeah, no. I mean,
seriously,
they hate me so bad where it's like there's nothing I can do anymore.
Have you been posted in Japan Circle Jerk?
Oh yeah, just the other day there was this post. It was called Matt vs. Self, and it was like some guy just took one clip of a conversation I had with him where I was telling him harsh stuff, and he just posted that out of context, and it was just people shitting on me.
I was called a baby rapist for saying "rue" verbs is a bad verb classification because every type of verb can have a "rue" verb in it, and I made a video like that, and people were calling me baby rapist in Circle Jerk because of that.
Yeah, I mean, the first time that I really got shitted on like that, like I really felt like shit.
Oh,
like,
so did I. I felt like, oh my God, maybe I don't know Japanese really well. It's hard.
Well, it's like for me, it's like I knew that they're retarded, and I knew that I was right and they're wrong. It's just like that instinct that like is programmed into you to not get hated by your tribe. Right. Back when you were a caveman, if you get kicked out of your tribe, you're gonna starve and die. It was just like, man, people hate me. No, this is bad. I need to delete all my videos and erase their memory.
And even though the guy was called Nazi cum farts, I was still affected by him.
Yeah. It's like logic can't stop that.
I actually re-recorded that video. I re-recorded it. I made it, and I even said maybe my tone was too harsh, but I still think and that's the way Genki teaches it. And I was saying Genki's a fine book, but the way that they're teaching verbs isn't intuitive. It makes you think that rue verbs is a thing when it's not. But yeah, we don't have to get too deep into that.
Well, I think it's like the thing I always just tell myself is like anyone who like Japan Circle Jerk is all about shitting on people, right? And anyone who just shits on people in their free time for fun, like obviously isn't a very happy person. So.
Well, I think the thing is me and you need to make videos for the people that want those videos.
Yeah.
We're not making videos for the people that are going to shit on it. And initially, I was just blocking everybody. I was like, "Fuck you all!" Like I was just like, how you can hide them from the channel. I was hiding them from the channel, but then I realized, you know what? They're a benefit. If they're commenting and downvoting, that still helps the YouTube algorithm. And I'll take it, and then a lot of times I'll take a negative comment and I'll heart it, and then I'll just let the people that enjoy me it'll cause a little bit of drama in the comments, and it helps. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's just a matter of slowly building up my thick skin.
Well, look, I feel like there's no animosity between us, and I would love to continue talking with you.
Yeah, totally.
Just leaning on each
really
other. I would love to. I'm gonna give it a shot because I'm not closed. My method has changed a lot over the years based on what I've learned. When I learned Korean, I learned a lot of things that needed to change in my method because it's all a learning process. And I'm not going to lie and say that I think HChat's bad. It's not. I think there's no way I couldn't try it, learn from it, and then incorporate it in what I do in my videos too, and tell people what I learned. So
cool. Yeah. Well, if you ever have any questions or anything.
I will, and I'm going to constantly probably talk about your channel too. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was really great to talk, and come to a mutual understanding on everything.
Yep, excellent. And I didn't just support you for this one time. I'll keep supporting you
Oh,
on
awesome.
Patreon.
Yeah, awesome. Well, see
Yeah.
you around in the chat.
And then, are you in Japan right now?
No, I haven't been in Japan for like 5 years.
Where do you live?
In Oregon.
Oregon. Oh, we're not that far apart. I'm in
I'm in
Vegas.
Portland. Cool.
I'm in Vegas, so we're at least on the same side of the country.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, maybe if I ever head up there, we'll meet together. We'll do some sort of collaboration. But I definitely want a copy of this. Whoever recorded it.
Oh,
You guys-
cool. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's turned out to be really awesome.
We'll put some Japan footage behind it or something, and just let it roll out.
Sweet.
Excellent. You have my permission to put it on your channel too.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, everyone wins. Sounds awesome.
Yep. Man. Well, good luck, man. And if you guys want to ever ping me, I doubt you do because you're doing a whole different method. But you can ping me. I'm in here too. So nice meeting you all.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yes. 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 Okay. What's your YouTube? Okay. What do you do up there? Okay, great. Well, hey, let's all agree that this market is big enough for everybody. There's enough people learning Japanese, and most people buy multiple books. They buy multiple methods. They watch multiple. You don't just like Star Trek. You like Star Wars, Star Trek, Galaxy Quest. It's not limited to one guy, and that would be the worst way to learn Japanese anyway. So yeah, you have my permission too, Nukemarine. No problem, and I appreciate you recording it. Right here.
You can just pick him in the chat.
Yep, I am. Yep, no problem. And Rommel, I see you saying AJAT from zero. That's definitely something that I would consider approaching Matt on, because he could definitely write that kind of a book. But maybe Matt wants to do it by himself. Matt seems like a guy that could do it by himself.
I'll take all the connections I can get.
All right. Well, I'm going to head out. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Have a good day, guys. Bye.
Anyone else want to talk to me?
Hey, Matt.
I mean, man.
That was pretty insane.
Well, that was a pretty cool chat, but I'm going to go.
Okay, yeah.
And, yeah. I'm going to go back to AJAT. I mean, you'll have a great